Welcome to Deep Thought. So many worlds out here. I'm gonna tell you what. Usually when I'm thinking about a subject, I'll go through my own archives and see, did I talk about this before? Oh, I've talked about this a lot. Because one thing that's always fascinated me was just different groups of people, different subcultures, different communities. But in many ways, you can call them different worlds. There's a different world. You know, there's this illusion that, you know, we all have the same values and everything. And, you know, they'll talk about the mainstream. But if you think about the mainstream, that's just the interaction of people between different worlds. If you start paying attention to people, they got different cultural mores, different interests, different ways they will adorn themselves. And it actually goes beyond like race. It goes beyond race, even though you have plenty of subcultures that may be race specific, but they are different worlds. You know, and I always thought about that, and I've always studied that. And I thought about that one time, like one example, when this young man who was an unrepentant drug user, he said, you know, I can go any place in the country and I can find where the drugs are. And he told me why, because he said he knows what to look for. He knows the signs, he knows the signals. And I'm gonna tell you what, I couldn't argue with him because I've never used drugs. Well, yeah, that was that one time, but I was very young. I said no after that, and it was just one instance. But I'm not in that world. You know, if you talk about like fetish community, stuff like that, distinct subcultures, those are different worlds. And indeed, you could even argue that different social classes are different worlds. It's a very different dynamic driving through a rich area and in a poor area. It's a different mindset. Because like I remember when I was driving through a rich area of San Diego, and I was like, oh wow, look at how it looks. But then maybe a mile or so away, you know, it was more working class, the stores and everything, the homes and everything. And that's an incredible thing. Even where I live now, I mean, I'm within reasonable driving distance of mansions, but then also trailer parks. But those are two different things that people are going to interact. In fact, I even talked about that before, how people of different classes could even look different, physically different, very minute, but you can pick up on it. You know, it's like one group might have the tattoos, different haircuts, maybe out of shape, not as healthy, teeth missing, whereas, you know, the other class, shoot, they look like dolls. You know, look like they were drawn that way. It was like, wow, you know? But it's a different mindset, because if you think about in rich areas, they're not stressed. They're not stressed. Yeah, they work for a living and all of that, but ultimately, they're not stressed from work or trying to pay bills or have to worry about a medical emergency. You know, if somehow one way or the other they get a hole in their roof, they can just fix it. Just call, hey, can you come? I'll pay you extra right away. Whereas somebody in a poor area, or like a car accident, that's an even better example. Car accident. Somebody from an affluent background get in a car accident, and no matter what the car is, they get it taken care of right away. They get it taken care of right away. They don't have to think about it. The car might come back looking good as new. Shoot, even better. Or they might just get a new car. Whereas someone in a poor area, if something happened to that car, they might not have the money to, even if they have insurance, and contrary to popular belief, there's a lot of people out here driving without insurance. So if they even have insurance, they can't pay the deductible. They have to drive around with that dent for a long time. And shoot, they had to drive around with it. They might be stressed because if the car isn't working, they might not be able to get to work. And then that creates another problem. You know, if there's the slightest medical emergency, there's a problem. Now, because of those circumstances, these are, yeah, they can both be citizens, and, you know, they might even pass each other on the street. In fact, one might be working at some restaurant, being the server for the other one, but it's still different worlds. Them being in the same place is just is just the interface between the two worlds. And it's so many little ones, small, big, everything. Whenever somebody try to, like for example, you get it like in these spaces when it's talking about women, say, oh, women are like that. No, they're not. It depends on the subculture. Because when I see videos or I see people showing some clip of some women saying something, I'm taking a look at it. I'll say, well, no, if she was in this subculture, she'd be totally different. Or if she was in that subculture or that social class. It's very limited. Usually what we see is what's considered closer to the mainstream, indeed the white mainstream, if you're going to be honest about it. Because a lot of stuff said is different values there. It's different values, even as far as aesthetics, even as far as aesthetics and what's considered physically attractive. And I've said that before, like in some areas, some communities and stuff, hey, you can probably be that, like that man or woman that got a little bit extra weight on you. They may not think about it. It depending on what region you in, what racial background, what your economic class, it's not even a big deal. For another world, it's a very big deal, And indeed, I would say this, and this is something the CIA picked up on decades ago, because they had said by 2015 it wouldn't be so much about countries as it is organized groups. And there was someone else I think they wrote a book regarding tribes, and they were talking about bigger tribes. I can't think of the gentleman's name off the top of my head right now, but you got different groups. Some of them are macro groups, some of them are smaller groups, and they're looking at things totally different. It depends what's going on within their group. And they're affected by, like the economic situation. People are talking about the economy and all of that. Depending on the world, different worlds are going to respond differently to what's going on. Like the middle class, worlds that are more middle class and more poor, they might really be affected by a recession. Worlds that are more affluent, they might not notice. They benefit. They're making more money. And indeed, people who, even on the spiritual, because some worlds are more spiritual, they might not have the same consumer mentality as the mainstream interface. So they're not really as worried. They don't spend money the same way. And they might, in fact, their economic situation may be based on the world that they're in. Because there are situations, like with many subcultures, many worlds, they have economies within. They dealing with stuff within, and people are going, spending money there. And as long as they stay there, they'll make money. And all they would need sometimes, and one of the things I have to look for is see if anything is self-contained to the point where it's not affected. But just the way money circulates, even when they say recession, money's still circulating. So different worlds just tap into it differently. So it depends. It depends on so many factors. But I always think about that, though, because it's just fascinating because, yes, we have the mainstream interface, which I'll call it now, but you got so many people interfacing with it. You got so many people, but then when they not dealing with that interface and they more into their own worlds, it's a different thing. It's a very different reality, even as far as relationships, how people interact, how they marry, how they don't marry, what's important to them, the foods they eat. It's so many different things. And it's always something to think about. So, I'll probably do another Worlds video, probably within a year anyway. But it's something to think about. It's something to really think about. It's so many differences. There's no like all, like people say, well, it's the majority. No, it's never a majority. That's something to think about. It's a group, and it might look big to you, but then in the grand scheme of things, it's small. Like, for example, say if I'm in a world, well, not me myself, but you're in a world rather, where maybe 20,000 people adhere to it. And you pretty much as best as possible stay within that world as far as how you work, how you interact. Yeah, and you might think, oh, this is a majority of people, but it's not. But also, say in a situation of a recession, you might not notice. Because with most businesses, depending on how much you charge, if you got out of 20,000 people, you have something that caters to people in that community. And let's just say you have a customer base of maybe 500 people, you can still make a lot of money depending on what you're doing. Depending on how much you charge and just the nature of the community. So you might be insulated. And indeed, there are many people who are actually insulated greatly from the mainstream interface. Very many people, seriously. They ain't noticing because of how the money may be circulating within that subculture, within that world. I want y'all to think about those things. All right. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Really think about that. Think about what world that you're in. Think about the world. And indeed, many people might inhabit several worlds at once. Boom. So anyway, that's all I have for today. I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.